What to do if your data's been breached, the latest twist in the ad blocker war, and digital maps that do more than help find the nearest Starbucks. Tech News Tonight is next.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Tonight, episode 437 for Friday, October 2nd, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Epson's new EcoTank printers. With Epson's line of Super Tank all-in-one printers, you can print thousands of documents without running out of ink. EcoTank is loaded and ready to print when you are. Visit epson.com/ecotank to find out more. Welcome, I am Megan Morrone. Let's get to the tech news. In the last 48 hours, we've seen a rash of hacked networks, including T-Mobile customers who had their credit processed through Experian, Trump Hotels, retail brokerage Scottrade, and the crowdsourced donation site Patreon. In total, more than 25 million identities have been compromised. At this point, it's still unclear exactly what data has been stolen and from whom, but if you have accounts at any of these places, it is a very good idea to change your password and check your credit card for suspicious charges. Even if you don't have accounts at any of these places, it's still a good idea to change your password and to make sure you're not using the same password for all your sites. And treat yourself to a password manager like LastPass or 1Password. You are worth it. Now, Google officially became Alphabet at the close of markets today. The company will start trading as Alphabet on Monday morning. According to a notice on their investors page, shares of Google Class C capital stocks and shares of Google Class A common stock will begin trading as Alphabet Class C capital stock and Alphabet Class A common stock, respectively. Google announced the name and structural changes back in August. The online advertising businesses, including Search, Android, and YouTube, will be called Google and will operate as a wholly owned subsidiary under Alphabet. Owen Williams over at The Next Web is reporting that an unknown buyer has just purchased one of the most popular tools for blocking ads. Over 40 million users have installed the ad block extension on Chrome or Safari. Yesterday, people using the extension saw a pop-up that said that ad block had now begun participating in the Acceptable Ads program by IO. You might remember IO. They're the people we talked about last week in reference to the iOS 9 ad blockers. IO lets companies with acceptable ads pay to be put on the whitelist. It's a way for companies with responsible advertising to stay afloat, but it's fair to say that it's also a little bit controversial. A few weeks ago, popular app developer Marco Arment made news by pulling his iOS 9 ad blocker from the App Store, saying he just didn't feel good about being in charge of managing a whitelist or of blocking all ads. The pop-up notifying people of the deal with IO also said that AdBlock had been purchased, but it did not say by whom. The Next Web says the buyer wished to keep his or her identity a secret. Siri is about to say a lot more than, "Here's what I found on the web" about that. The Wall Street Journal reports that Apple has acquired a UK-based startup called Vocal IQ. It's designed to help computers and people speak to each other in a more natural dialogue. Vocal IQ uses machine learning to improve on its interactions with humans and to help understand comments and their context. It also asks for more information when it doesn't understand something. Today's acquisition also hints at the possibility of a forthcoming Apple car, since Vocal IQ software has previously been used in car voice recognition. And speaking of communication, there is hope for the grammar snobs among us. The Wall Street Journal reports today that dismissing a potential date because of poorly written online communication is one of the last acceptable prejudices allowed in online dating. That's right, some singles are still picky about grammar gaffes when it comes to using the web to find a potential mate. And of course, there's an app for that. The Grade is an app that checks messages for typos and grammar errors and then gives users grades from A+ to F. You also get demoted for using abbreviations like "What's up" and "YOLO." And coming up, how open source technology is helping the Red Cross deal with crisis. But first, this episode is brought to you by Epson. Epson's revolutionary EcoTank line of printers for home and office introduce a new age in printing. The new EcoTank ET4550 wireless all-in-one printer doesn't use ink cartridges. It features an ink tank, and It's refillable. The tank comes with enough ink to print 8,500 pages, equivalent to about 50 ink cartridge sets, and that lasts about 2 years. You can print wirelessly from your tablet or your smartphone. All EcoTank printers deliver unbeatable combination of convenience and value with ultra low-cost replacement ink bottles. Now you have the freedom to print without running out of ink. So visit Epson.com/EcoTank today to transform the way your home, office, or work group prints. For the best combination of ease and value, turn to the new Epson EcoTank printers. That's EPSON.com/EcoTank. And we thank Epson for their support. Epson, exceed your vision. These days, we trust the GPS apps in our phone more than we trust our own memories. But our guest today has written about how many places in the world don't have the luxury of accurate GPS, and she's written about what some technology is being used to change that. Welcome, Caroline O'Donovan, senior technical reporter at BuzzFeed.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on. So you write that the Googles, the Microsofts, the Apples, they have an incentive to map places like San Francisco and New York City because that's where the customers are. Tell us what kind of problems this causes in places that don't have updated digital maps.
Sure, yeah. So it makes sense, right? If you're an Apple or if you're a Google, that your main customers, the majority of the people that you're building products for are right now, at least given who owns devices, are in the Western world. So why wouldn't you, build the most accurate maps for the rule that they use in the articles where the closest Starbucks is. But if you don't live in a place in the world that has a Starbucks, the likelihood that someone has come by year after year in a Google van or whatever it happens to be to map the area is significantly lower. Which, I mean, of course, there are still traditional maps, but the sort of ease and convenience that we expect to have in terms of just using a GPS that knows where you are, knows how to get where you're going, and doing that kind of mapping doesn't exist in a lot of places outside of sort of the developed world, which is, can obviously be a frustration, not just in day-to-day life, but for people who are trying to organize if there should be a crisis or a government needs to organize, some sort of infrastructural build, for example, projects like that. It can really stymie that kind of development.
Right, and as you say, of course there are traditional maps, but we've gotten so used to these kinds of maps, and in a crisis we just expect them to be there. So the Missing Maps project that you wrote about, they're trying to solve these problems. Who's involved in the Missing Maps project?
So I think it started a little bit as a more casual alliance, but it's a project of the Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders to begin with, and they were working with the OpenStreetMap team. So OpenStreetMap is actually used by a couple of technology companies as well, including your Pinterest and your Foursquare, I think. The idea being that instead of considering the mapping data proprietary, you consider the mapping data open source. So the Red Cross saw an opportunity. I mean, the Red Cross has mapping experts on their staff, right? Because obviously knowing where people are, landmarks are, buildings are, roads go is a huge part of the aid work that they do. But I think they realized an opportunity to sort of partner with technology companies as well. So the company that I interviewed, in addition to talking to the Red Cross about this, is called Mapillary. And they actually don't do their own mapping software, which is why they're also working with OpenStreetMap. So OpenStreetMap provides this open-sourced digital map, and then Mapillary does sort of what a Google Street View does, in that they try to capture images of different places, but instead of doing so with the car-mounted cameras that a Google would use, they try to crowdsource them. So the idea is that I could throw a GoPro or something on my helmet, bike around my neighborhood, and produce crowdsourced Street View images, which could be used for any number of scenarios, including potentially a Red Cross crisis. But for Mapillary, more broadly as a company, they're just trying to build sort of an open-source Street View comparable to Google, but different in a couple of ways.
Yeah, it seems like it would be more accurate being crowdsourced. They'd be more flexible. Are there any other advantages that the Missing Map project has over Google Maps and Apple Maps?
Yeah, so they described a few to me. I think if you think about the way Google is able to do things, obviously we talked about the places that are being mapped. Google will come by every 3 or 4 years to map a space if you're crowdsourcing a space of a special interest. So there was a town in Haiti where this collaboration originally started, for example. So if you have everyone in that community who has access to a camera mapping that repeatedly, you can sort of get more up-to-date images. So you could look at how a place changes over a couple of months. You can look at how a crisis impacts the way a place looks and have mapping data for that, which is not a gap that Google necessarily is oriented to fill right now.
So you also say that the mapping project helps with donor relations. Explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I thought that was actually pretty interesting. There, obviously, right, if you're trying to bring aid to a rural community, you need to know where the roads go. You need to know where certain things are. But there's also the idea that if you're working in a community to maybe, I think the examples they gave were bring more streetlights or to reduce sewage on the roads or provide more housing. If you can show with these crowdsourced images over time, okay, here's what a street looked like before we came in, here's what this street looked like 6 months or a year into the project, and here's what it looks like today. You can take that to someone and say, look, this is where the money is going. This is the progress that we've made. This is how we've, actually changed the living environment of a place for these people. And I think, of course, you could always have before and after pictures of something, but I think we've all experienced, right, the magic kind of a Google Street View when you can really navigate a place and see and feel like you're there. And I think that for the Red Cross, and I'm sure for Doctors Without Borders as well and other organizations, this technology is sort of an opportunity to provide the people who are interested in helping with a more immersive experience.
So can people get involved, people that live in different places, can they get involved in this project at all?
Yeah, sure. So, anywhere you go, you can kind of bring a GoPro or any camera really and attach it to, like I said, your bike helmet, carry it, stick it on a car. I think the Red Cross sticks them on their Land Rovers when they're doing stuff. And you can map anywhere. So some people choose to map their hometowns. I was told that people, like if you have a specific sort of hometown pride, people like to do that. Or you could, travel. I think they had something like 20,000 images of a city in Zimbabwe that people had collected, and then you can upload them to the site. Depending where you are, you might want to wait until you get back to, more of an urban area to try to upload all the images. But anyone can presumably participate. That's sort of the point of it being open source, I think.
Well, Carolyn, thank you so much for coming on. Caroline O'Donovan is a senior technology reporter at BuzzFeed News. You can read her whole article up on BuzzFeed, and you can see her on Twitter at @CODonovan. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Megan.
Take care. And finally tonight, our producer, Jason Cleanthes, discovered the ViewMaster Virtual Reality Starter Kit at Target today. We reported this a few months ago, and now it is here. What do you think, Jason?
I've only had a little bit of a chance to play with it. I've really enjoyed the build quality of it and how it works. It's pretty sweet. It's definitely made for younger audience. It's listed as age 7 and up. It's got a bunch of great apps. The cool thing about it is it works with Google Cardboard really well. So you can use the Google Cardboard apps as well as the proprietary Mattel apps, and you can explore locations. It doesn't have a headband or any of the features of like a Samsung Gear VR or a Oculus Rift, because it's not really designed for long-term use. It's more designed for exploring places and learning about different places and seeing animals in the wild and learning about space, going to places that maybe kids couldn't normally go to, obviously. So it's pretty sweet. It's going to be fun to play with over the weekend and get a little more experience with it.
Yeah, it looks cute. It doesn't look like it looks like it would fit your head, even though it's designed for children. But yeah, I know you're really into VR, so I can't wait to hear what you really think of it.
It's going to be fun. It's definitely going to be fun to play with.
And I got an email from Daniel about the conversation I had with Natalie Morris on episode 435 about the new chip and PIN credit card changes. Daniel writes, switching to PIN verified purchases may not be as consumer friendly as you would think. With the introduction to chip and sign cards, credit card companies are shifting the blame for fraudulent purchases from the processor to the businesses. For chip and PIN cards, most cardholder agreements shift the blame for fraud directly onto the cardholder by saying that if the PIN is stolen, then it must have been from negligence with regards to the PIN secrecy. Daniel also referred me to a 2011 DEF CON talk that's on YouTube. We'll put the link in our show notes. He adds, use of the smart cards, the ones with the gold contacts, is a better way of handling payments than MagStripe, but don't think for 1 second that the complex and bloated standard that is EMV is the holy grail of payment cards. It has flaws, and those costs may start to hit consumers harder. Thank you for your feedback. We love hearing from you. You can email us at tn2@twit.tv or megan@twit.tv. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm at Megan Morrone. And that's it for this edition of Tech News Tonight. You can also subscribe to the show at twit.tv/tn2. And you can watch live every weekday at 4 p.m. Pacific. And don't miss our morning news program, Tech News Today, every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm Megan Morrone. Thanks for watching.
Bandwidth for Tech News Tonight is brought to you by CashFly.com.